All right. Here it is, the deeper dive. The final week countdown begins, Adam. We've got about 7 days left of baseball, and then it concludes for the 2018 season, at least from a regular season standpoint. And you know what? I'm ready for it. I'm ready for some basketball. I'm ready for some more football. But today's slate, of which I wrote up in the deep dive and at the top said, I don't know how much of this is relevant because it could change within the hour. Well, had a bit of a situation here at home, was away from the computer for 2 hours. I come back and you're like, yeah, the Indians don't have a single major league hitter in their lineup tonight. So, yep.
Yeah, a lot's changed, I think, in the last hour as lineups come out as far as roster construction and obviously plays.
I mean, so just so we're clear, the Marlins and Nationals have pretty basic lineups. Dallas or Astros have a lineup without Tyler White, but one that I actually don't mind. You're getting pretty much the same from the Blue Jays, from the Red Sox. Orioles have their typical shitty lineup out there. Yankees. Who else? I think most teams have a relatively consistent lineup, like Pirates, Rays, Cubs, and then you have the Indians. Any other teams I'm missing here that are just way different than we've seen?
Arizona threw out a pretty bad one too. No Paul Goldschmidt today. No David Peralta. You have Christian Walker hitting fourth, who is 2 for 2 with 2 home runs off Kershaw in his career. But you have Socrates Brito batting seventh, J.R. Murphy batting eighth, Chris Owings leading off. It's not the best lineup for Arizona.
All right, so mostly run of the or par for the course lineups, but not everywhere, particularly in Cleveland. Let's start with Washington, though. We'll go game by game here. We got 12 games on Monday. Steven Strasburg, Sandy Alcantara. I mentioned to you earlier today something that was wild when I was writing up Strasburg. He has thrown his changeup. Okay, since returning from the DL, right? He's thrown his changeup 117 times. He's recorded 37 whiffs on the pitch. That's an insanely high number, Adam. So even though he might not be getting the same velocity on his fastball, his off-speed stuff, particularly that changeup and a pretty solid curveball, have been nasty enough, to get him some really solid outings in his last two starts.
Yeah, and he's throwing that changeup a bunch to righties as well. Since coming back from the disabled list, a 34.3% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters, it's just been absolutely dominant. And then you get this just god-awful Miami team with 6 righties plus the pitcher in their lineup. And it's not like Strasburg's bad against lefties either. So I really like the spot for Strasburg here. I think he ends up being lower owned than Kluber, but I have them pretty much neck and neck as far as projections go. Miami actually has the lowest implied run total on the slate. So as long as the weather cooperates in this game, I really do like Strasburg.
So do I. It's also probably worth pointing out that Kluber's win odds and run support probability dropped dramatically with this lineup for the Indians.
Yeah, it's just such a bad lineup. Yeah, I agree that Strasburg. I haven't looked at Vegas, but I would assume Strasburg's a bigger favorite than Cleveland once that line adjusts.
I'm looking now. Earlier in the day, Kluber was the heaviest favorite on the slate. No surprise. Now it is Strasburg, 267. Impressively, Kluber's still a 230 favorite, which is pretty surprising given that lineup. Let me make sure it's updated here just to be sure. Yeah, still 230 favorite. So Strasburg's the heaviest favorite on the slate, though. And it's right now, what did I say? 267. So you have that working for him. This is the same Miami team that he went 6 2-run innings with 11 strikeouts last time he faced them. As you mentioned, their lineup may be the one you expect, but it's still not good. 7 righties, including the pitcher, and JT Riddle and Magneuris Sierra being their only 2 lefties. Really, really good spot here. And there actually are enough strikeouts. We saw him punch out 11 of this same lineup last week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just not a good lineup. And it's not like he's expensive. I mean, Strasburg for his talent level could very easily be, 11.5 to 12K here, and I'd still be interested. So him sitting at 10,700, I'm not really concerned about how often these minor league hitters strike out.
Same can be said for Kluber too. Not expensive either. I was very surprised by the pricing here.
Yep.
But we have that. These guys will, unless something changes dramatically over the next hour and 45 minutes, there's no doubt these guys will be the two highest pitchers, owned pitchers on the slate, as they should be. Right now, on awesemo.com, you need a premium subscription to view this excellent stuff here, but I'll give you a little bit of an inside look. Kluber with 11% higher projected ownership than Strasburg right now. So we'll see if that changes as we get closer to first pitch. This is the first game um, to lock on the slate, the only 7:05 game. Washington bats against Alcantara. Any interest here?
Yeah, especially as a stack. I mentioned in chat today that on this particular slate, I think I'm actually going to be full stacking more than I have been lately. Obviously, I've talked a lot about going with 3-man stacks, but with this being an 11 game slate and just the way that my roster construction is broken down, I've found myself full stacking more often. And this is one of the spots where I think it's really viable because it is a bad Miami bullpen. And Alcantara is a guy who has pretty good stuff, but he walks so many hitters that I think the best way to get exposure to Washington is to full stack here because I don't know where power is going to come from. I don't know who he's going to throw strikes to, but when you have if you can get 4 or 5 of these guys into a lineup against a guy who walks a bunch of hitters and against a bullpen that's weak, then that's how you get you maximize your upside in this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's a bad spot. There are a few teams I just really, really, really like tonight. I'm assuming a lot of people will really, really like them as well. One of those teams, as we move to this next game in Toronto at the Rogers Center, is the Houston Astros. Adam, we haven't really talked much about the slate off camera today, but I have a tough time not really liking this lineup. I was hoping White would be in it, but you're not paying a premium for any of these bats, particularly Bregman, who's 4,500 on DraftKings. Jose Altuve, whether you want to buy into it or not, has been way better on the road, not just this year or last year, but for the last 3 years. Against righties on the road over the last 3 years, he has a 439 WOBA and a 210 ISO with a 181 WRC plus. Those numbers have stayed consistent, lower this year, but still way better against righties on the road than they have against or at home against any handedness. Altuve at a relatively weak second base position. Bregman. I'll even throw Gaddis, Gurriel, Springer in there. I like this Houston team against a homer-prone fly ball righty who's giving up 2.88 home runs per 9 to righties at home this season. What about you?
Yeah, and don't sleep on JD Davis hitting 8th here. Multi-position eligible on DraftKings, first and third base. Really nice price tag. This is a guy who, has obviously spent most of his time in the minor leagues, but has 70 grade raw power, 45, 50 game power. And it's a spot where he can go deep, and this is Houston's a team where I do expect them to be really popular, especially on DraftKings because they're just simply mispriced for the upside that they have. But including a guy like JD Davis, who is going to be much lower owned than people like Springer and Bregman, is one way that you can differentiate there. So I do really like these bats, whether it's as a full stack or as one-offs, because we know that Estrada gives you a ton of home run upside. I will say that if you're playing large field tournaments, and I was talking to Josh about this before the show, it's obviously not a spot where Estrada's in a good spot at all. But if you're playing large field tournaments and you have a lineup that does not have Astros and you are using a cheap pitcher, try and convince yourself to get some Estrada in there just because you will leverage against such a massive percentage of the field. It makes it easier to win a tournament in your non-Houston lineups by just having Estrada instead of whatever other cheap pitcher you were going to use.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously not a spot where you feel good about it, but
No.
like we've done so often this year, if Houston ends up not getting the job done, you're talking about the biggest type of shift you could see in terms of leverage. So
Right,
yeah,
because you're gonna have a really high percentage of full Houston stacks, but then you're also gonna have so many people playing Springer one-offs and Bregman one-offs that it's gonna be a monstrous percentage of the field that has at least 1 or 2 Houston bats.
right. Now I will say the chances of Estrada working through this lineup clean are very, 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 very small. Like I would say you're going to knock out a large majority of Houston stacks, but I'd be hard pressed to think there's any way that a bunch of teams with one-offs here don't have,
Yeah, like there's probably going to be a home run or two.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. To pretty much just make it clear there, Estrada's likely not going to go scoreless or hitless in this one, but yeah, no one's going to touch him. I really like Houston bats here, though. I think it's a good spot, and with a bunch of these guys, say it again, Adam, they're not that expensive. Like Bregman's 4,500. Um, Altuve's 46. Springer's 42. I know these guys haven't exactly been crushing the baseball lately, but they're not that expensive. It's not hard to get like a Strasburg Houston stack or a Kluber Houston stack. It's not impossible at all. Actually, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, no, I mean, before the Indians lineup came out, I was hand making my lineups, and I actually had nothing but Houston stacks because I could just pair two aces with them, use some of the value bats that we'll talk about, as the show goes on, and just have some pretty really really high upside lineups. So yeah, they're clearly mispriced here.
They absolutely are in this matchup. Any thoughts on the other side of this game? Keuchel pitching for the Astros against this Toronto lineup.
Not really. I mean, you have power right-handed bats, but in like Hernandez and Grichuk, but it's a pretty loaded outfield slate. Jonathan Davis is 2,700 on DraftKings leading off. He isn't a great hitter in the minor leagues. He does have a ton of speed. Keuchel's really hard to run on. I mean, you can put him in if you really need him and just hope he steals a base, but it's not someone I'm really that interested in.
Me neither. It's just Houston for me and pretty much nothing else. Boston and Baltimore. Dylan Bundy and Eovaldi. I guess we can start with Eovaldi here. He's been very, very difficult to predict. He had a stretch there where he was looking really good and then kind of plummeted back down to earth, very on and off recently, Adam. But he does have a matchup against the Baltimore team that, just isn't good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 righties in the lineup, three switch hitters, and DJ Stewart. What do you think of this spot for Eovaldi?
Eovaldi's fine. I wouldn't talk anyone off of him. He's kind of in a dead spot for me though, because I do prefer Derek Holland in that price range, who we'll talk about later, and I don't see me going with two guys from that price range. There are concerns about how deep he actually will go into the game. He hasn't thrown more than 83 or 84 pitches in a while, and the Red Sox have talked about, or at least hinted at, him being a reliever in the postseason. So there's not a ton of like impetus on them stretching him out and getting him to 100 pitches. So I think that's a legitimate concern. Not to say that he can't have a really effective 5 or 6 innings against this Orioles team, but with all the pitching on this slate, I don't find myself going to Eovaldi that much. But I mean, it is a good spot, so I wouldn't want to talk anyone off of it.
Yeah, it's tough. He's not expensive. He is a huge favorite, which should come as no surprise to anyone. Actually, Baltimore's 3.1 run total is the second lowest on this slate, tied with the White Sox who face Kluber. He's a 247 favorite. There is a lot working for him here, but I just don't know if I can trust the guy. I probably sprinkle him in there, but not as I wish. You know what? I kind of wish I could be higher on Eovaldi than I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like if I were max entering tonight, I'd probably go, 15 or something percent Eovaldi and just hope that I'm right around the field.
Absolutely. Now with Boston bats, you have Betts, Benintendi, Martinez. Bogarts is in the lineup. It was looking like he might not have been. I know he got pulled yesterday and then said his shoulder felt fine after the game, but there were questions of whether or not he'd be there. He is batting cleanup. Devers batting 5th. Pierce, Holt, Vasquez, Bradley. The only guy not in the lineup that I was hoping was Ian Kinsler. Bundy has good strikeout stuff, Adam, but no team strikes out less against righties than this Boston squad, and Bundy still gives up 2.2 home runs per 9 to righties.
Yeah, really tough spot for Bundy here. It's obviously a good park for right-handed power, and he doesn't really discriminate in who he gives home runs up to. He does strike righties out at a high clip, but he doesn't strike out lefties at a high clip. So guys like Benintendi and Rafael Devers, I think, are really good plays, especially because Bundy has also struggled to hold runners. Both of those guys can run on him if they get on base. I prefer Betts over JD Martinez just because he's more difficult to strike out, but you obviously get a ton of upside with Martinez as well. Jackie Bradley is a guy who, if I am full stacking, I want to include him in at least some of them because he's going to be lower owned than the guys at the top, but he's a lefty. He has some power and he's fast. So he's a guy that I think makes for, a really good play from the bottom of this order.
Yeah, me too. This could go a couple different ways, but we know Fenway is very good for righty power, so that's, one thing right there in the favor of Boston. And then the amount of quality bats they have with power is another thing. I mean, it's tough for me not to like this team a lot. against Bundy, but we've seen him so many times just go out there and limit damage. The thing is, even when he doesn't, or even when he does, he gives up some home runs. So, what are your thoughts on like one-offing this Boston team if you're not stacking them, just because Bundy is so prone to giving up home runs even during good starts?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, he gives up a ton of home runs. He gives up stolen bases, and this team has speed and power. The lefties, who like you have Benintendi, Devers, and Bradley, who even though it's harder to hit home runs as a lefty in Fenway, they have enough speed that they can run. The righties obviously have the 310-foot short portion left, and most of them have speed too. I mean, Betts and Bogarts both have speed. Shortstop's really, really weak as well, especially with Lindor not in the lineup. So, yeah, full stacks against Bundy, and then hopefully a bad Baltimore bullpen, or just one offs, hoping to grab a home run and a stolen base against Bundy. I think it's all really good.
For sure. Astros, Red Sox, the two teams we've just touched on, two of my favorite teams on this slate.
Yeah, not even really close for me.
Yeah, not exactly. Really not that close. Um, you know, outside of that, though, I can't fall in love with the Evaldi. He just doesn't. You're not seeing him pitch deep into games anyway. I don't think he goes particularly deep into this game, and it's kind of it. Do you have anything else here that you like? Anything from Baltimore?
Nah.
Okay, I figured you didn't, but I had to ask anyway. Tampa Bay and the Yankees. Diego Castillo leading this one off. Um, you know, Oh, and by the way, Ryan Yarbrough should be the guy that comes in behind him. At least that's what I'm assuming, right? Yeah,
Yes.
it
Yep.
should be Yarbrough. And then Jonathan Holder. It was Luis Severino, then it was Sonny Gray, now it's Jonathan Holder. So maybe it'll change again as we go forward. But I mean, his pitch counts, he hasn't thrown more than like 20 pitches since August.
Yeah, and I haven't seen. I didn't see after they announced it was Holder if Gray's coming in after him or if they're going with a full bullpen game. But I don't think it really makes a difference. I don't have interest in Tampa bats, and I don't have interest in any of the Yankees pitching because we have no idea what they're going to do. So,
I can't figure it out either. I've
right,
looked.
but I mean, like Gray's expensive enough that if he's not starting the game and he's going to come in and throw like 60 pitches, I'm not going there anyway.
No way.
And Tampa, I mean, it's just such a good Yankees bullpen. It's a bad park to hit in. There's a million other spots on this slate.
Yeah, really, really unappealing game. And I don't really care what Vegas says here in terms of odds or in terms of run totals. Like we've seen Tampa Bay be a very difficult team to hit with these bullpen games. And Yarbrough's not a bad pitcher. It's just, as you pointed out, probably a better game just to ignore, especially given that we have a lot of other great bats to target. The Cubs in Pittsburgh, two really solid pitchers, right? You have Jameson Taillon and Cole Hamels on the bump. Hamels went his first 7 starts with the Cubs, not allowing a single home run, and now he's allowed 5 over his last 3 games. Got blown up by the Reno Aces when Arizona rolled out that minor league team the other day. But outside of that, Hamels has been good. There's no question. And then Jameson Taillon's also been great, but you're talking about a price tag that is up there with Strasburg and Corey Kluber today.
Yeah, I can't bring myself to go to Taillon, especially outside of PNC. He's one of the guys that we've seen pitch so much better at home over the course of his career. And then now you just get this tough Chicago lineup. You get an elevated price tag. It's just such a thin play to me. I don't have interest even at low ownership. I do think that Javi Baez makes for a really, really interesting one-off in tournaments because we're getting him at basically like 10 to 20% discount in price because of the matchup. And we know Taillon is good against righties, but Taillon can't hold runners to save his life. So Baez is in a good spot to steal. He can homer off anyone. The guy's just got monster power. I think that he's going to be gives you a ton of upside as a one-off at second base or shortstop.
I like that. And those positions, as you mentioned, they're not deep positions whatsoever. So it definitely opens things up. Just in the other side, I'll throw in that I don't think Cervelli's the worst play here. Catcher's really weak. Um, I'm glad we have Walters. It sounds crazy, but like Walters is one of my favorite plays at catcher, and that says a lot because it's such a bad position. But Hamels does still struggle with righty power, and it happens from time to time. Recently, he has been giving up some home runs. Wrigley's a pretty neutral park. I'd say leans a little pitcher friendly with no wind, but I don't think Cervelli's the worst play at his price. Outside of that, though, just not a game I'm very into. And curious, what about so with Cole Hamels, you're getting him in a mid 8K price point. Um, and you're probably going to see his ownership somewhere around like 10%, maybe 12%. Do you have any interest in him?
I have some. I would leave him in my player pool. My thing is, though, I just don't think I'm going to end up with very many lineups where I have two mid-range pitchers. I like Derek Holland more than him. I would play him if I can find the money over Eovaldi, but it's just I don't know. It's a Pittsburgh team that doesn't have a ton of strikeouts. We haven't seen Hamels be quite as sharp as he was when he first came over to Chicago, like you said. It wouldn't surprise me if he has a good game, but there's just so many other options I like more that I don't see myself actually rostering him.
Yeah, I wrote him up, but it's more so just because it's a decent spot, not a great spot,
Right.
and I don't love him.
And I think I'd rather find the money. It's like I like Derek Holland for less money, and I like Jack Flaherty for a little bit more money.
Yeah, pretty much. And then Tion's just too expensive for me,
Yeah,
man.
no chance.
He's been really good, but I just can't do it. Can't do it. Like last week was his ceiling, I think, and which is solid, but I don't know. We're getting that 2 weeks in a row. All right. Cleveland and White Sox. Kluber, Dylan Covey. Earlier in the day, Cleveland had the second highest expected run total on the slate. I think it was at like 5.6. It has since dropped to 5. It actually went down to 4.8. I think it came back up because if you look at Kluber, he went down and now he's up. He went back to a 244 favorite. So it's crazy. His win odds have not changed hardly at all. I mean, a little bit, but given this lineup, you would think it'd be a little bit more. I guess it's just more so to do with the fact that he's so good. It doesn't even matter what the lineup looks like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's still probably not going to give up runs, and that's really what matters. So, yeah, I mean, I like Kluber a lot. I've seen people talking about being concerned about his workload in this game. I'm not expecting him to be limited. I doubt that he'll be pushed. He's not going to go out there and throw 120 pitches or something, but I would expect him to go out, throw around 100 pitches in a really good spot against the White Sox. And he's discounted enough also that I'm really just not concerning myself with trying to guess at, if he's going to be pulled early or something because we're getting such a discount in the spot. So he's right up there with Strasburg for me as far as the number one pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, I'm with you. I did mention that I had a little bit of concern that Francona might look to keep him fresh and not let him throw 100+ pitches, but that's just kind of what Kluber does. Like I don't know. It's really tough for me because it's such a good spot that unless he gets yanked at like 70 pitches, which I really don't see happening, Kluber is probably going to be fine, unless he gets shelled. But assuming he's cruising along, I don't see many ways that Francona lifts him very early anyway.
Right. And I mean, it's just totally guessing, and he's
Right.
cheap enough that if he was 12K where he should be priced, then, fine, factor it in a little bit more, but we're getting a discount on him.
Right. No doubt about it. On the other side, though, you have this Cleveland lineup: Greg Allen, Yandy Diaz, Melky Cabrera, Encarnacion, Alonso, Gomes, Geyer, Gonzalez, Rosales. Yeah, we're probably disagreeing here, but I still don't want to play Covey, especially not if everyone else is going to do it. Like I'm.
Everyone else isn't going to do it.
You think Covey will still be very, very unpopular?
Yeah. Cole Hamels was 12%. He's actually like a known good pitcher.
With the update, our ownership has him at 31%.
Covey?
I'm just kidding. 4%. 4%.
Yeah. I mean, then he'd still have a 5 implied run total. He's facing Kluber. Like, people aren't going to go there. Yeah, I'd be shocked if he got above like 10%. Probably won't get above 5 or 6. And I am going there because he actually has, he's not a strikeout pitcher. We know that, but he gets a lot of ground balls. He's done a good job against both sides of the plate since August 15th. A 306 expected WOBA to left-handed hitters. I think 286 to righties, below 300. And you have 6 righties in this lineup. For the season, a 62.5% ground ball percentage against right-handed hitters. Outside of Encarnacion and Yonder Alonso, the WRC pluses for the hitters in this lineup, you have Greg Allen at 64, Diaz at 87, Cabrera at 93, Gomes is at 80, Geyer at 39, Gonzalez 98, Rosales 45 since the start of last season against right-handed pitching. So it's just such a terrible lineup. He's minimum price basically. He's stretched out. I mean, yeah, Covey's pretty easily my favorite cheap SP2.
All right. I can't hate you for it. Kobe also, like, if there's one thing about him that you could say, yeah, it's not bad. He doesn't allow a ton of power. Like he doesn't allow many home runs. Cleveland on the road has also, had some pretty rough games. I think the only you mentioned the WRC pluses, right? For these guys, weighted runs created plus. If you're curious, what do the K rates look like?
The lineup overall average 22.4%.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't looked at the individuals yet, but would be curious here. You know what? Screw it. I got it right here. So Indians active roster against righties. Let's see what we come up with, because that would definitely make me a little bit more inclined to go this way. Okay, so let's see what we have. Sorry, really good live stream right here. Allen, Diaz, Cabrera. I mean, I would assume they're not going to be that high, right?
Melky Cabrera's Melky's at 10%, and that pulls it down. But like Encarnacion and Alonso are around 21%. Gonzalez is at 24.
Yeah.
Diaz
Geyer's at 29.
Yeah, Geyer's 29. Rosales is 32. Allen's like 18. Gomes is 27.
Yeah, so it's really not that bad, actually. I don't know if you mentioned Gonzalez. Yeah, 24 and a half. Yeah, you have so Gonzalez, Rosales, it's Gomes in the lineup.
Yeah.
Gomes, Geyer, a bunch of guys above 24%. Yeah, okay. Yeah, not bad. Even Encarnacion's up there around 23 and a half. So not that bad from a strikeout standpoint. Having no Lindor, no Ramirez, no Brantley is just massive from a K standpoint too.
Yeah. I will point out, even though Greg Allen can't hit, he will steal if he gets on base here.
All right. No, I think it makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Covey get lit up because he's Dylan Covey, but you could definitely do worse. And hey, he's pieced together some decent games throughout the season, and this is a bad Indians lineup. And you're right, because that implied run total, because the money line, which really means nothing in this spot, it's everything to do with Kluber. Yeah, probably still going to be overlooked. Any hitters in this game?
Greg Allen. That's it.
Just for the stolen base upside.
Yeah.
All right, Milwaukee, St. Louis. You have, by the way, Dan Jennings, who I don't know, might throw base face one batter, might pitch an inning, and then I guess we're seeing maybe Chase Anderson, and then you mentioned that you have some interest in Jack Flaherty, so let's hear it.
Yeah, so I have no idea what the Brewers are going to do. We haven't really seen them say anything other than it's a bullpen game, but that could be Dan Jennings facing Matt Carpenter and then them bringing in a righty. It could be him going the first inning. It could be Chase Anderson piggybacking him. It could be a true bullpen game. We really have no idea what they're going to do. I mentioned on the show this morning, kind of semi-seriously, Josh Hader being $4,000 and having some interest, but there's just so much uncertainty about what's going to happen with the bullpen here that I'm not actually trying that. I just don't. I'm not messing with Brewers pitching at all. Not going to the Cardinals bats either because the bullpen is so good. If I knew for sure that Chase Anderson was coming in, I would have interest in the power right-handed bats for the Cardinals because that's what he struggles with. But I just have no idea, and I don't really want them against the Brewers bullpen. So I'm not overly interested there. Jack Flaherty, it's tough to get to him because there are so many aces on this slate, and it is a good Milwaukee lineup. But Flaherty's just been really, really good, striking about 26% of left-handed hitters this year, striking out 34.5% of right-handed hitters. You have, pretty balanced Milwaukee lineup here. I think that Flaherty's an interesting tournament option just because he's going to go overlooked because of his matchup and because of how many other options there are. But you get a discount on him compared to, guys like Kershaw and Kluber and Strasburg. So I have some interest there if I can't find the money for someone better or someone more established in a better matchup, I guess.
Another thing too related to Anderson is, first of all, we're not even sure if he's going to see some work and how much he would if he did. But he has been a lot worse at Miller Park, where the homers just fly out of there. I mean, the home run splits are huge there, and I buy into it because it makes perfect sense. 30 home runs allowed this year, 22 at home. That's a drastic split there too, Adam.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like it's not too hot in St. Louis today either.
No, I thought it was like 65 degrees or something.
I see like 75.
75. Okay, yeah. Um, let's move on to Colorado, Philadelphia. Then this is an interesting one because you have John Gray and Zach Eflin. I mean, Gray has just been putrid lately. Originally, it was Tyler Anderson, and I was going to play. I was going to play a lot of Tyler Anderson.
So was I.
Or yeah, I mean, this spot was perfect for Tyler Anderson. I wrote him up, and then I had to delete it all, and then put in some half-assed reasoning for why Gray could be okay. But the truth is, man, and we'll get to the hitters in a second. The truth is, John Gray has been really bad lately. I mean, John Gray has struggled mightily, no matter where he is, no matter who he's facing. And sure, he's faced some difficult matchups, but even in some easier ones, you're talking about single strikeouts, like one strikeout, and the home runs have just been flowing recently. Multiple home runs in two of his last five. At least one home run allowed in 10 straight. It's tough to trust him right now. I'd love to play him against this garbage Phillies team, but what gives here? The movement, the velocity's down a little bit, but nothing significant. The movement on his pitches is fine. He's throwing the same pitches the same amount of the time. What is going? He has been the most impossible pitcher to evaluate and figure out all season long, when he was doing bad, when he was doing well, and now when he's doing poorly again. It's so difficult to figure this guy out.
Yeah, it's really tough. And you mentioned the velocity being down a little bit. There have also been a couple of games in this stretch where he really hasn't thrown his slider a lot, which was concerning to me because that combined with the dip in velocity made me think maybe something was wrong with him. The fact that it's been, like 5 starts now that we've seen this, happen makes me think that he's probably fine. Like the Rockies, I don't think would be running him out there injured for that long without figuring it out. So I really have no
down AAA again.
Right. Yeah. I really have no idea how to project him going forward. I mean, the swinging strikes haven't been there at all. He's since in his last 5 starts, going back to the 27th, he has allowed a 518 expected WOBA to lefties, only 336 to righties, which is decent. But even against righties, a 7.5% swinging strike percentage. You have this Phillies team that has 4 lefties in the lineup and 4 righties, not including the pitcher. In cores, like there's certainly potential for Gray to go out here and put up a big game. The price tag is too cheap for him if he's healthy and if he's at his peak. But we just haven't seen him be that good, and I have no confidence that it's coming back this game. So if you wanted to have some exposure in tournaments, like go for it. Just know that there's a ton of risk here because the stuff hasn't been there for the last 5 starts now.
It hasn't. Is it possible that the Phillies can remedy those problems? Yes, but it's also very possible that they can't. And I guess the thing here is if we don't buy into. All right, let me ask you metaphorical gun to your head. Is Gray getting really, really unlucky, or is something really wrong? You have to answer one of the two.
I think I would guess something is wrong. And
okay,
I just pulled it back up. You mentioned that over that stretch, his pitch types have been basically the same, but it's kind of skewed because over his last 5 starts, so for the season, he's averaging 33.8% slider usage overall. Over his last 5 starts, 21.4, 21.6, 62.4, 24.5, 32. So 4 of his last 5 starts, he's been, at least slightly below his season average. 3 of them, he was, pretty significantly below. He's increased his curveball a bit over the last couple of starts. I don't know, it's just weird. Like he's not going to his wipeout slider. The velocity's down a little bit. I'm just concerned about if there's something going on, like with his arm.
All right. So the natural progression of that question would be, if we believe something's wrong, and I think you're right. If I was max entering the $10, say, I would still have like at least 5, maybe even 10% Gray, just in the off chance that he does have that ceiling game and something isn't wrong. But I'm erring on the side of caution along with you. So naturally progress that into, do we have to target Philly bats as a result?
I think so. I mean, they're not one of my favorite stacks because they are priced up here relative to what we would expect from them. but obviously it is a ballpark boost, or a ballpark boost going in the cores. And they do have, the three lefties at the top of the lineup with Hernandez, Santana, and Herrera that are, they're all less than 5K. Like 4,900 for Hernandez is tough, but 45 for Santana, 42 for Herrera is fine. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's another spot where I prefer a full stack. I don't like any of them really as one-offs, but if there's something wrong and he's just sucks again, then you want as many as you can get.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Catcher's horrible too, so Wilson Ramos has to be thrown into the mix. But on the other side, Adam, like Zach Eflin looked really good at the beginning of the season. I still wasn't buying into, you know, him being great against lefties. And I think he's proven that he still has some serious weaknesses against left-handed hitters. And I am going to look to exploit that today. I love Blackman, David Dahl. Um, I'm really not huge on the righties, but the problem is that Gabe Kepler pulls Eflin at the first sign of trouble anyway, so he might only throw 60 pitches. And you know what? The position is bad enough to where, yes, I'm going to have a decent amount of Tony Walters just by default. Where are you at on the Rockies?
So I'm not playing Tony Walters, but other than that,
Silly. You know he's gonna, dude. You know he's gonna have two triples like
yeah,
he
I was gonna say
always
he's
does
gonna
when you
triple.
don't play him,
Yep.
because that's what he does.
Oh
He
yeah,
racks up triples.
yeah. I would swear that Tony Walters had like 12 triples this year.
I know he only has 4, but it feels like every time you play him or he's in play, he
Right.
triples. Does
Yeah.
it not?
Yeah, it's insane. But yeah, I mean, I think the Rockies are another team that's just a little bit underpriced. I think Eflin's a decent pitcher, but he is more susceptible to left-handed power than right-handed power. So obviously, I really like Blackman and Dahl. But then when you look at the price tags for the righties, DJ LeMahieu at 4,400, that's a price point I actually like him at because he is a good hitter. He just doesn't have a ton of power. Second base isn't that deep. Story and Arenado are cheaper than we normally get them in cores at 51 and 5K at a weak shortstop position and a third base position that's okay. So yeah, they're my third favorite stack here. I think there's a ton of upside. As far as one-offs, Blackman and Dahl are my two favorites.
Me too. Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even, especially if you're doing like a 4-2-2 stack, having Blackman and Dahl in there just feels really nice. And because Walters is batting so low in the lineup, you could throw him in there. You'd have the 8-1-3, which isn't crazy. Look, Tony Walters isn't good, but there. I think I'll say this much: when I was writing today's article, catcher was terrible. It definitely opened up a bit with this Astros lineup.
Yeah, you have Gaddis, you have McCann, both in there. I just
Right.
there's no way I'm going to Tony Walters for like more money than Mike Zunino or Brian McCann.
Oh, sir, you'll regret it. But no, I mean, clearly don't blame you. Gaddis right now is my top catcher, but wouldn't blame you if Zunino or whoever else you said was yours. Let's keep going then to, well, anything else in this one? I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah, nothing else from this one.
All right, Dodgers in Arizona. Then you have Robbie Ray coming off one of his best starts of the year, 6 scoreless with 8 strikeouts in the win against Chicago, against the Cubs, and then Kershaw, who, dude, Kershaw has been much better lately, but you can't make the argument to me that his ceiling is where it once was, because I don't even think it's close right now. I guess the question is, how much do we like him against a not skeleton crew, not Reno Aces lineup for Arizona, but definitely not their normal starting lineup either. And my thing though is like Kershaw, is he even going to be that much lower owned than like Strasburg? Because if not, then I just have real no true interest in him. Maybe you can change my mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of torn on him, especially as the day's gone on, and I've kind of thought about it more because, for one, the roof's open in Arizona, so this plays much better.
That really killed Herman Marquez the other day, didn't it? My God.
Oh, I know.
11 Ks again. The dude's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's amazing. But but I mean, when you're talking about this many pitchers that are in good spots and are really good, it does move me a little bit. It moves the needle a little bit for me here. And Kershaw's just been inconsistent lately. We've seen the ceiling start to come back at times, finally getting more swinging strikes, finally getting more strikeouts. But then it kind of goes away for a couple of starts, and it's just hard to feel real comfortable with his upside. Like that last start against Colorado was really frustrating. He was, low owned, which was nice, and he kept getting 2 strike counts and then, just getting ground balls and then finally gave up a few runs. So I don't feel super confident in him, but I do think the price tag is just too cheap for his talent level, which does have me pretty interested. And it's also not the best lineup. No Paul Goldschmidt in there, I think makes a big difference. Christian Walker, has a lot of power and I think is worth considering as a fairly cheap value play in tournaments because of the upside. But it's not a great Arizona lineup. Kershaw is at the very least still good at preventing runs, so I think the price tag is really fair. I would have him behind Kluber and Strasburg. Then it becomes pretty close to me between him and James Paxton at a discount.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's a bad price tag either. It's just from an opportunity cost standpoint, is it worth taking $600 savings over Strasburg or $1,000 from Corey Kluber? That's where I'm at.
I still
But
think that he'll be lower owned, like a lot lower owned than them, just based on his last start was in a kind of similar spot where there were a bunch of aces. Granted, he was, I think, 11,100, but he was
mhm.
similarly priced to a bunch of the aces, and he came in at like 11% owned.
Yeah, I think tend to agree with you here. That would make more sense, but we'll still have to see because it's right now showing him around 19. But I agree. I think that comes down a bit too. Uh, Robbie Ray facing the Dodgers, they have the 8 righty lineup. The only non-righty is Clayton Kershaw, but Taylor, Turner, Freese, Machado, Kike, Kemp, Dozier, Grandal. Any interest in either side of this one? Because I've kind of find myself off of both sides more so because even though I think there's some power upside with the Dodgers, I've just had such a tough time prioritizing them over teams like Houston and Boston and the Colorado Rockies to some extent.
Yeah, I have a tough time prioritizing them as a full stack, especially because you do run so much pinch hit risk later in the game.
Mhm.
But Manny Machado and Justin Turner, I think, are too cheap. They're both $4,600. We know Ray is a real boomer bust pitcher, but both of these guys are really tough to strike out. Both have a ton of power. I think that they're both really, really good one off plays.
Okay. That's it, right? Nothing
Yep.
else on this one?
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the Angels in Texas because I had seen a comment in our YouTube chat that Covey chalk or something, but I think if there was a chalk cheap pitcher on this slate, it's likely to be Felix Pena.
Yep.
Um, and I don't even know how chalky, but early in the day, my first assumption was that Pena has to have some popularity here against this Texas team. I guess what I'm asking you though is with Pena, the one thing that has been blatantly clear is that he strikes out a lot more righties than he does lefties. I mean, his K rate is 10% higher against righties than it is against lefties, 26% to 16%. Um, you're gonna get, and I don't see it yet, but you're going to get a Rangers lineup with probably 6 lefties in it. What does that do for you?
So I think that Pena is cheap enough that he is a perfectly fine play. It's a good ballpark. It's a Texas
Mhm.
team that will strike out plenty on their own anyway.
Should get
And
run support too. Should get
yeah,
some run support.
yeah, that too. But so my main issue here would be, for one, I think he will be the most popular SP2, like you said. But when you look at his numbers against lefties, the strikeout numbers, so he has a 16.8% strikeout rate against lefties. He's allowed a 341 WOBA to lefties. He's $1,700 more than Dylan Covey, and he's higher owned than Dylan Covey. Dylan Covey against righties, which is mostly what he's facing, has a 13.6% strikeout percentage and is allowed a 303 WOBA. So is it really worth it to spend, if you're just looking at the season long numbers, to spend $1,700 more for a more popular pitcher who strikes out a little bit more hitters from the side of the plate that he'll be facing predominantly, but allows more of them to get on base? To me, it just seems like really similar projections for the two guys, and one of them's way cheaper and one's going to be way lower owned.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think Pena probably still puts up solid numbers here, but I'm not particularly afraid to fade him either.
Right.
Um, like the things working in his favor would be number one. Well, another thing that's going to have him being pretty chalky is the fact that this Rangers team has a 3.8 run total. Pena's like a 150 favorite, which for a guy at his price is pretty nice on both fronts. Uh, he's been good. I don't really take these home road splits much into consideration. It's a pretty small sample, and there's no real reason he should be worse at Angel Stadium. But yeah, it's not a bad spot. I don't think he kills you either, though. Is I'd project him for somewhere around like 17, 19 fantasy points, maybe a little more with the win.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think he's a fine play. It's just that I think I can do just as well a lot of the time by going to Covey.
Now these Angels bats, you've talked a lot about Calhoun coming back to earth, and he certainly has. But you're still talking about a guy that since the All-Star break has a 322 WOBA, 233 ISO against righties. So it's still overall since the All-Star break, he's been very good. We've seen a big boost in production. Um, you have Calhoun and Trout, and if you want to throw Ohtani into the mix, this seems like a very good spot for the Angels.
Yeah, I mean the park sucks, and other than that, there's just nothing not to like. Adrian Sampson's just been terrible. 371 expected WOBA, 306 expected ISO to lefties, 537 and 374 to righties. Obviously, a small sample in the majors, but in the minors doesn't get strikeouts either. And you just have so much upside in these Angels bats. Calhoun's really cheap at 3,400. Upton, at 4,700, I think is appropriately priced. But then you have Ohtani at 4,800, I think is too cheap. Mike Trout obviously is the best hitter in baseball in a great spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jose Fernandez is questionable. He's day to day after getting hit in the hand. But if he does play, you have him as a $3,100 DraftKings first base / third base option, probably hitting second. So I think that it's a really nice combination of upside with, Upton, Trout, Ohtani, but also with value from Calhoun and possibly Fernandez.
Yeah, I like this spot quite a bit. Trout is one of the best hitters on the slate. I mean, he's obviously, best hitter in the world, but even on this slate, he's in a very good spot. By the way, I did want to say too that if you're just trying to decide between Blackmon and David Dahl, and you had a tough time and you can only get one of them in there, I would just say Blackman's got a bit more stolen base upside, but outside of that, I think they both probably will run if given the opportunity against this battery today. To backpedal for a second there, and I like that. The only reason I mentioned it is because I have some lineups where it's either Blackmon and Dahl or Trout and one of these Colorado bats, and trying to figure out which one to go to. But this whole Angels outfield is great. The only problem is you can't play all four of them if you wanted to stack, and they're easily the top four bats from this lineup.
Yeah, flip a coin between them. They're both really good.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I'm saying the Angels lineup though, with all four of the out, like Calhoun, Upton, Trout, and Ohtani. When you want to stack this team, like four per player stack, it's tough because you'd rather just stack the whole outfield. And
yeah, exactly. Really good fantasy draft stack.
Yes, good point. Good point. Seattle and Oakland. We had a question in chat from Travis Jackson about James Paxton. I'm seeing his projected ownership like extremely high, and that surprised me because you're talking about a guy that was dealing with flu-like symptoms and pneumonia for the past couple of weeks. He has a very tough time staying healthy. I tell you, Adam, if James Paxton didn't have these health problems, this dude would be a 12K pitcher every 5 days, but he does. And it has been a problem, and it's happened with meltdowns on the mound because he gets injured or sick mid-start. And then you see these performances suffer as a result. But he's facing an Oakland team. You ready for this? That in 3 starts, well, let's say 12 and a third innings. How many strikeouts do you think Paxton has in 12 innings against Oakland this year?
18.
27.
Yeah.
27. He had the monster strikeout game against them, but still, even when he faced them, like, what was it? Earlier this month, he had 10 strikeouts in 5 innings. It's insane what he's done from the strikeout standpoint against them.
Yeah, and I mean the price tag I think takes into account all the concerns with him, so I certainly have interest here. He's he missed those couple of weeks, but it's not like he was injured. He threw his 40, felt fine. The guy had a 20% swinging strike rate in each of his last 2 starts before I'll take my chances on Paxton here. I think he has as much upside as anyone as long as he can stay on the mound.
He does, and that's why I love the guy. I have some concerns. It's his first start back. He threw like a 40-pitch bullpen session, so I don't know how many pitches he's going to throw. But He's also a guy that if he threw 5 innings could give you 10 strikeouts like he did the last time he faced Oakland. So yes, I absolutely have interest in him. But if you're talking cash games, there's no reason to go to Paxton over Kluber or Strasburg, just to be clear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And kind of in that same vein, I expect his ownership to come down lower than we're seeing right now too. Like
I
I just think
think
that
so.
Strasburg and Kluber. What do you say?
I said you would, yeah, you would think so, sure.
I mean, I just think that he's priced close enough to Strasburg and Kluber that you're going to see them get up closer, maybe 40 and 30% or something, and Paxton come back down.
Yeah, I hope you're right, and I think you will be. Is there anything else from this game that you're interested in? I know you mentioned Zunino earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there's some cheap power upside on Seattle if you're looking to pay up for two pitchers. Cruz is 4,300, Zanino's 32, Healy's 34, but there's nothing I'm prioritizing.
Yeah, Steve Carter said Paxton expected to be on a 70 to 75 pitch count. Um, Last time that happened, I faded him and he had like 35 fantasy points. I remember that vividly. He went like 7 innings on 70 pitches. It was ridiculous. But I
I
didn't.
remember.
Did you see that?
I haven't.
Uh,
I'm,
Steve.
I'm googling again now, but
Yeah, Steve, if you don't mind, let us know where you found it because that's pretty important. And I appreciate the info if it's accurate. San Francisco, San Diego, let's speed it up here and close this one out. Derek Holland and gas can Brian Mitchell. I'll let you talk on Derek Holland. I will say one thing, though. I actually don't think if you wanted to go cheap at shortstop that Brandon Crawford batting cleanup is the worst play here because he can gap plenty of extra base hits inside the cavernous AT&T Park. Go ahead.
I think full stacking San Francisco is fine if you're trying to get
Oh,
into
all right.
ace pitchers. It's just a really bad pitcher here in Brian Mitchell. Obviously a bad park, but and a good San Diego bullpen. But San Francisco is so cheap that I think it's a kind of contrarian way to go. And as far as one-offs, I agree that Crawford's fine. Chris Shaw, if he's in the lineup, this is a guy that has monster power. Hasn't really shown it in a limited sample in the majors, but major strikeout problems, tons of power. Brian Mitchell doesn't get strikeouts. So I think Chris Shaw is a really, really good one-off in tournaments. Also, I did just find the article on Paxton, expected to throw 70 to 75 pitches today.
So that pretty much puts him out of play.
Yeah. So I'm not playing Paxton.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. So some interest in, full San Francisco stacks, and Chris Shaw is a one-off for me. Also, Derek Holland here, he's pitched really well at home all season long. He's struck out 29.3% of right-handed hitters in AT&T. Even though his slider usage overall has come back down, in August and in September, both against right-handed hitters, he's thrown his slider 30 and 33% of the time. That's a pitch that he gets a ton of swinging strikes on. It's led to his resurgence in terms of getting strikeouts. So I really, really like Derek Holland here.
Yeah, so do I. It's tough because I don't know if I mean you can do Strasburg Holland. It's really not that tough.
Yeah, it's not that tough, especially with guys like Calhoun and Chris Shaw, and there's plenty of value on this slate.
Yeah, so it's really not that difficult. All right, top positions, and we'll head out of here. Hand over to Live Before Lock show. They'll take you up till 7:05. Go ahead, pitcher.
Strasburg, Kluber, Covey.
Yeah, Strasburg, Kluber, Holland, Covey. I'm on board with you there. It's worth the risk. Catcher, give me Gaddis, Walters, McCann. I guess I'll throw Ramos in there. What about you?
Gaddis, Gary Sanchez at 3,900, I think is fine, and Austin Hedges if he's in at 3,400.
All right, first base.
Carlos Santana, Jose Fernandez if he's in the lineup, and JD Davis.
Yeah, I like the JD Davis call. He's very cheap. Aside from that, Yuli Gurriel. We don't have any Mitch Moreland. I don't think. I don't think Steve Pearce is crazy either. Just because Bundy's homer problems to righties and Santana. Second base, Jose Altuve, far and away my top option here. Aside from that, though, there isn't a whole lot I like. You mentioned a good point. LeMahieu's cheap, but not very, very shallow position.
Yeah, Altuve, Daniel Murphy, and LeMahieu for me.
All right, third base.
Bregman, Devers, Turner.
All right. Yeah, Bregman, Devers batting fifth, and I'll throw Arenado in there, but I'm really not huge on him.
No Justin Upton solves that problem.
Oh, nice. There you go. Okay.
Jose Fernandez batting cleanup.
Ooh, look at that. Shortstop, give me Xander. Really like me some Xander Bogarts today. Trevor Story's in the lineup. I guess I guess Baez. I don't know. I really like Xander though, and I'll have some Bregman here as well. What about you?
Xander, Machado, and Baez.
All right, outfield.
Blackman, Dahl, Benintendi, Otani, Trout, Calhoun, Nomar Mazara, Chris Shaw.
Yeah, pretty much all the same guys.
Springer.
Boston, Colorado, Angels, and Springer. All right. Top stacks. I'll throw them out there. I already did. Houston, Colorado, Boston, Angels for me.
Yeah, Houston, Boston, Colorado, Angels, Giants if you need a cheap one, Washington.
All right, that'll do it. Stick around live after lock show. Live before, not after. That'd be pointless and silly. Live before lock show coming up right now. Going to take you up over the next hour till 7:05. Get you ready. All right. Good luck. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the